All right, hello, and welcome to part four, the final part of wearing the mask and other good things you should do, a public health discussion of why we do the things we do. So, in our previous two lectures, we focused on the socio-ecological model, which is a behavioral framework for understanding health behaviors, and then the science behind the suggestions or the public health recommendations for helping prevent the spread of coronavirus. And of course, these are washing your hands frequently, practicing social distancing, and wearing a mask when social distancing isn't possible. So, we talked about the science behind things, but ultimately, public health is about action. So, in this talk, we're going to focus on how do these elements of the socio-ecological model and the science behind the suggestions influence ultimately the behaviors that we hope you will practice each and every day? So first, the individual level. So what individual level factors go into your decisions specific to the coronavirus? So probably the biggest one is, are you in a high risk group? Now we know that people with asthma, with heart disease, with diabetes are in a higher risk group for complications from the coronavirus if they ultimately are infected with it. So if you are in this high risk category, it stands to reason that you'd be more likely to practice these preventative behaviors. Then there are general attitudes behind the science of the COVID-19 pandemic. Not everybody believes it's as big of a deal as others. So if you're in the group that perhaps is generally dismissing the pandemic and the severity of it, again, it stands to reason that perhaps you'll be less likely to practice these behaviors. Relationship factors. So at home, what does your family do? What do your friends do? Do they practice these behaviors? That likely influences what you do every day at home and then at school. But also the relationship factors with the higher risk categories. Do you have family members or friends who are in the higher risk group? That likely impacts your behaviors and the likelihood that you will practice the big three preventive behaviors. Community factors. Now this is one that gets a little bigger because now that you're coming to St. Ambrose, we're talking about two different communities. So first, let's start at home. What are the norms where you live? Certainly not the same everywhere. People are coming to Ambrose from all over the Midwest and broader out than that, and so the norms that they bring with them are going to differ. Part of this also goes into what is the severity of the pandemic where you live. If you live in what we call a hot spot or a place where the rate of the coronavirus is higher than others, it's a good chance it's going to impact how likely you are to participate in these preventive behaviors. And then at school, what do you see people doing? Wearing the mask, practicing social distancing, good hand hygiene are all visible things. We see people practicing them. So what do you see? What do you see SAU students, faculty, and staff practicing? What you see them doing is going to influence ultimately what you do. And then finally are the societal factors. So these are generally talking about rules and regulations. Now, in week one of this short course, you heard a little bit about the practices and the rules and regulations that will be going on at St. Ambrose University, but this also extends to what happens at the federal level, more likely at the state level, and sometimes at the community level. These factors play a big role in what you do. So by understanding the influences, we can be more informed in asking ourselves why we are practicing behaviors or why we are not practicing these behaviors. It requires some self-reflection. And so if you catch yourself not wearing a mask, understanding why not may help turn it into a why you are going to practice the behavior. But now you're in college. And it's important to know that influences are not a one-way street. We have the option and I'd say the responsibility to not only allow the influences to impact us, but us impact those influences. We ultimately all have a responsibility to do our part to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. But unfortunately, not all people do or will take that responsibility seriously. So those visible actions that we do, washing our hands, wearing the mask, practicing social distancing, those can start a wave. By us practicing the behaviors, we can influence our close friends and our peers who may be hesitant. And then if enough of our peers and our group starts practicing the behaviors on a regular basis, it can spread. The influence can spread. the positive influence can spread. And that can ultimately lead to a healthier St. Ambrose University. So to review, each level of the socio-ecological model influences our decisions related to coronavirus prevention. And knowing these levels and the influences can help us to check ourselves when we need it. And by being proactive, we can turn these influences outward. We can be the ones influencing a healthier and happier life at St. Ambrose. And it's worth noting, and you probably know this, but this doesn't just apply to COVID-19. It applies to all sort of health behaviors and all the positive influences that we can be at the St. Ambrose community. So thank you very much. I appreciate your attention. I come down to campus about 2 or 3 times a year because I'm an adjunct for our online program. But if you see me on campus, say hey. If you have any questions about the MPH program, about the coronavirus, or you just want to hear about what Roland Hall was like at the end of the 20th century when I lived there, send me an email. I'll be happy to chat. So thank you again. Stay safe, take care of yourselves, take care of each other, and be well.